If you are a fan of supernatural romance thrillers, this is for you. I wrote this book a few years back and thought it would be fun to share it with you. I hope you grow to love Anna and James as much as I do. Let me know who your favorites are. One could gauge the length of one's life by the memories one retains. People knew they had lived a long, complete life when some memories seemed like only a dream. The pain, loss, lust, and love left them entirely in awe that they even made it through. If Anna Reed had known she would live so many lifetimes, maybe she would have kept a written record of each somewhere, for her to remember each journey. She might have liked to remember the little things washed away by the waters of time. The only things she would never forget were the love she had gained and the love she had lost along the way. I know it will seem quite odd to be starting a journal this far along in the game, but I'm afraid time will steal memories I would rather not forget. I'm afraid many are gone already, but I will have to make peace with that. So, as many do, I will start at the beginning. My given name is D'Angela Dawn Reed, Anna for short. I've often wondered why my mother chose the most common deviation of the name. I have lived many lives already, but I should start with my first. I was born in the mountains of Virginia. The Blue Ridge Mountains were rightly named, as the sun made the ridges have a blue hue when one gazed upon them. The passage of the seasons allowed us to enjoy all the beauty nature had to offer. The spring brought the flowers, the fall, leaves, and the winter left the world in a blanket of white. I never really understood how poor we were, because love filled the void of finances quite well. My mother raised my brother and me. We lived in a rental too small for even a portion of our things. Mom held 2 jobs most of the time just to make ends meet. When school was not in session, my brother and I would stay at my grandmother's house, down the road. Anthony was 8 years my senior, but he always found ways to fill my day with fun and laughter. When Anthony finished school, he decided to join the military. He had an excellent work ethic and a drive for excellence. Anthony wanted to see the world and make a career of his service. I suppose he did, as he died in the deserts of Afghanistan. When my mother saw the military men dressed in their finest blues, she started to cry as she ran to the door. They showed the utmost respect for my mother as the news they brought ripped her heart from her chest. It seemed that an assignment had not gone as planned. My brother and his team met their end in the line of duty. My ears rang from the screams that came from my mother. Her knees buckled, and only the arms of the man delivering the news kept her from falling to the floor. She began to pray. She began to beg the Lord for anything, for everything. Nothing came but grief and unbearable longing for the son she would never see on this earth again. This loss was the turning point for my mother, and she started her downward spiral into madness. She knew nothing but grief and pain. There was never a father figure in our lives, and she was all we ever had. So her control was her only defense. She controlled every aspect of my existence. She made sure that every part of my life was as safe as she could make it. Activities that other children were allowed to do were entirely out of the question. I learned very early not to ask because she became nervous and agitated at the very mention of unnecessary risks. I fell into the exact steps of fear that she walked. I never resented her for that. Mom was always reading and had binders full of papers and notes that didn't interest me enough to go through. She studied folklore and legends from our region. She read every old ghost story she could find. She would even talk to the older folks. They told her remarkable tales of the mountain. Most believed there just wasn't anywhere quite like this place. One lady said she could feel the magic in the air, and being a young lady at the time, I could have sworn I felt it too. I never thought my mother's interest was much more than curiosity, but I soon realized how wrong I was. My mother was searching for a way to heal her broken spirit. She loved me beyond measure. I was the light in her otherwise dark life. She had to keep me safe, no matter the cost. She had to see what was out there in the dark, empty void of life. When I was nearing my 15th year, I walked down to my grandmother's house for the day. I never could have guessed that it would be many months before my mother would come back home to me. We had contact almost every day. Mother would call and ask about my day and explain that it shouldn't be much longer now. Grandma would smile and encourage me in any way she could. The time with my grandmother was so special to me. We sat, and she told me of her youth and all the plans she had made that never came to fruition. She hoped my life wouldn't be the same as hers. She wanted to see me fulfill all my dreams on this earth, and I have done so several times over. My mother's absence was difficult. Someone once said time would heal all wounds, and this was no exception. She did as she promised, and she returned to us. There was never really an explanation given to me, but I always assumed she had sought help for her grief. I could envision her in a white hospital gown in a sterile environment, recounting her loss. I imagined her healed and whole when she returned to us. I could have never dreamed of the change that awaited us. Mother still cried from time to time. Just as she always did, she mentioned Anthony longingly, but her tears were not always in the foreground. Sometimes the stories she told of her firstborn were accompanied by a smile. Her pain had melted just a little. I was thankful for that. Her grip was still tight when it came to me, but I always did the right thing to keep her at peace. When I was 17, Mom and I moved to a new house. This house was modest, but much nicer than our old house. It was closer to my grandma, and that was nice. Mom never went back to her job, and to my knowledge, she never worked again. At the time, it never occurred to me to ask how she managed all this. But now I know why. She willed me not to ask. She willed me to accept our newfound life, and she wanted me to enjoy it. School went as school often did, slow and tedious. I had a few friendships to speak of, but I enjoyed the education process. I soaked in new information like a sponge. I wanted nothing more than to continue my search for knowledge. I wanted to help people who were struggling. I wanted to be the light for someone else. With hard work and dedication, I achieved this. I received my master's degree in social work. I decided to start my career by counseling at the local crisis center. My chosen career proved to be a gratifying one. Someone once said that if you chose a job you loved, you would never work a day in your life. And I found this to be true. I had my whole life mapped out. I would earn my degree, get a rewarding job, and then find Mr. Right to start my family. Well, 2 out of 3 weren't bad. On a particular evening, I worked late and had plans to grab a quick bite on the way home. All I wanted to do was get home and get my shoes off. They were new and had rubbed blisters on my heels. My toes felt like they were in a vice. I knew these shoes had been a big mistake I wouldn't be making again. I was sure of that. The air was crisp, and the smell of fall was in the air. I slowed my car at the stoplight, and I decided that the shoes had to go. As we eased through the light, I fumbled with the buckle around my ankle on my left foot. I was able to get that thing off me, and I threw it on the passenger side floorboard. Its mate would never see it again. We traveled down a slight incline, so I decided to unbuckle my right shoe. I struggled with the buckle, turning my foot to get to the right angle. I took my eyes off the road for 1 second, and just that 1 second almost ended my life that day. My attention was slammed back to the road as my car veered to the right. My initial instinct was wrong as I jerked the car to the left. The harsh re-entrance of the vehicle to the pavement caused a terrible reaction. I was thrown back out of the road and down an embankment. My head hit the steering wheel with such force that I saw stars. The car came to a stop. The airbag deployed and hit me directly in my bleeding face. If the impact hadn't broken my nose, the airbag undoubtedly did. The highway happened to be a pretty busy section, so help arrived quickly. An ambulance took me to the hospital. I received 6 stitches, and my nose was to be set back into place. Unpleasant was a very understated term for it. However, the drama hadn't made it to the hospital yet, and there was no way to determine the personality I would get from my mother when she arrived. As expected, my mother came in like a bullet. She demanded and screamed and cried. No one understood her bitchiness as her attempt to control her fear. She was loud and rude and undeniably horrible. But I had never been so glad to see her in my life. I had never had any serious injuries, so this accident was devastating to us both. Even though I was 24 and technically a grown woman, I clung to my mother with fierce determination. She immediately asked who was responsible for this, and when I explained it to her, she said everything would be okay. I knew that had someone else been at fault, she would have killed them on the spot. When the doctor came in to talk to us, he seemed surprised. "It's very nice to meet you. I'm Dr. Jonas, and you must be Miss Anna's sister," he said. "No, sir, I'm her mother," she answered fiercely. He hadn't said anything out of the way, but that was the first time I realized just how young she looked. I was 24 and she was 50, but she didn't look it. She always looked young for her age, but she didn't seem to have aged in the same way other people her age had. She had the same face I remembered all my life. The accident proved to be a breaking point for my already fragile mother. The very prospect of a shoe being my downfall was unacceptable, and she didn't care to let me know that. Finally, after many hours of recovery, I was allowed to go home. As the fear lifted a little, I did get a long lecture about the importance of not being distracted while driving. She sternly advised me not to eat, not to fiddle with the radio, and definitely not to try to undress while driving. I knew it was coming, but it still made me feel 18 all over again. Yes, 18, because 16 was just way too young to be responsible for your life in a vehicle. Days passed, and I recovered fully just as the doctor said I would. But my mother had not. She pampered me until the word smother came to mind. I tried to explain that this was a freak accident and would never happen again. She would always say, "Your brother had an accident too." What could I say to that? I did my work from home for now. She seemed very pleased with that. She would often ask why I couldn't do it from home every day. It seemed like a way to save on gas and the wear and tear on my vehicle, but I knew it was that dark angel, fear, that fueled her questions. One afternoon, as we sat with our evening coffee, my mother asked me a startling question. "Do you want to know where I went?" "When?" I asked, looking up from my cup. "When I went away for a while and you stayed with Grandma." "Yeah, I figured you would tell me sometime, but it doesn't matter now, Mom. That was a long time ago." I gave a slight wave of my hand. I didn't want her to worry about it. "Yeah, it matters. It matters a lot. I just don't know where to start." She set her cup down and stirred it mindlessly with her spoon. I sat back in my seat and listened attentively to my mother. She seemed to be nervous, excited, and apprehensive. She had never lied to me. She had said things I didn't like, but she was always brutally honest with me. I had no doubt that whatever she said was the truth. It might have been painful, but it was the truth in the end. I think that's all I have time for today. I hope you will come back again for more of this amazing tale. Until next time, we wish you peace, love, and hope. Bye for now.